So we're going
Okay.
live.
Should I rattle Sorokin?
I'll call the committee to order. We ended up with the extra time, so we're going to be discussing the possible use. We went over the 3.2 million. I think we got some ideas about what we'd like to do with that, which was finish up the line extensions from last year, finish up the request for the cost assistance from last year for buying routers or paying your monthly bill. And we are waiting on Commissioner Tierney to talk to us. The governor has another 2.5 for line extensions, a 1.5 for pole data harvesting. And I think the 15.9 is something we're not going to do. The question is, everything we spend now, we won't have to spend when we look at a bigger proposal. Sounds like there's several bigger proposals. And one is, have we got enough line extension, or do we want to hold on to that 2.5? And whole data harvesting. That's what I'd hoped to hear from the CUDs on Friday, but didn't. And we might want to put a little extra into a fund for the CUDs. Some of them. Commissioner, welcome.
Good afternoon.
We got some extra time because joint assembly didn't really happen. So we thought we'd use it to take a look at the governor's proposal for using some one-time general fund money for broadband. And we've already come close, I think. We haven't written it down yet, to using the 3.2 to using whatever is 1 point something for the line extensions, 1 point something for the assistance paying the bills. And then you had a couple smaller proposals to cover. And then using the remainder to do a fund in your office that the CUDs are all over the place. And it is, some of them need help paying the rent and some of them need help with pole harvesting. So I think looking at the governor, he's got another 2.5 for line extensions. Is that something you need like in the next month to get done, or have we given you, do we need to spend all of that now?
No, there are two different pots here, because bear in mind that when we were preparing the plan that we put forward for the Broadband Infrastructure Deployment Fund, and when we were preparing to brief you on what remained from the CRF allocations from last year, we were on two tracks. So it wasn't clear which was going to go forward, which not. I had anticipated that the legislature might choose not to use any of the remaining CRF money for any of the activities that had been approved last year, and would instead choose to revert the money for other purposes that are CRF related. And so assuming that had happened, what the governor's proposed with one-time money is then what we would have done using that one-time money, and that had a line extension component in it. It had a help the CUDs and other entities that need it with planning and pole data harvesting expenses and the like, and then a revolving loan fund / grant fund that would be the corpus, or the main attraction, if you will, of that use of that one-time money. So now if you have resolved that we are going to spend some of the remaining CRF money on finishing up those activities from last year, then the pot of money that's carved out for the governor's one-time proposal would be for line extensions that are, from now until however long you choose to make that money available. But they're not CRF dollars. They're not bounded by the federal deadlines or anything of that sort. So I would not expect that we would be doing those kinds of line extensions in the next month or so. I would expect that we would be able to use the money that you've evidently chosen to give us from the CRF pot. We would use that money to finish up the wait list that we have of line extensions from last year.
Okay. So that gets us, and I don't think we're going to look at the 15.9 because there's several proposals out there that will be coming to us. And I think I'd like to reserve as much as we can, but make sure we are ready.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
and that is, as far as Commissioner, the CUDs are concerned, in the event that there was more money available, do you believe that the CUDs could respond quickly with proposals that are viable to use it, and that would be more likely to be expedited should money be available now rather than 2 or 3 months from now?
Are you speaking of CRF dollars, Senator Brock, or one-time dollars?
I'm speaking of one-time dollars.
Okay. I would expect that the CUDs in short order could propose things that would be useful to them to be done sooner rather than later. And the advantage of their using one-time dollars is they're not constrained by the deadlines that the federal government imposes for use of those. So that if they were to propose something and then it turned out that they were not quite able to hit their marks, there wouldn't be any disastrous consequences. A little more hesitant with CRF dollars just because they are more time constrained. But my understanding is that these CUDs could definitely use money. You heard the testimony last Friday, and some of them could use money yesterday.
Well, there's also the issue of money that they need to sort of keep the doors open and to begin to operate efficiently. And the question there is it possible to use any CRF money for those purposes?
I think it is possible. It's just riskier. There's always we continue to have that burden that we're facing of proving out, should we have to with an auditor, that these are pandemic driven expenses, that they fit
one of the things
limited category. I beg your pardon?
One of the things I would think that we could do is advance at least some sum of money so that they can get going and moving on these things. And then of our general fund money, what we can always do, since this is going to be a revolving fund anyway, we can certainly reserve a sum of money so that in the event that there is a clawback, that we have a source of funding available. But I'm concerned that delay has been one of the killers that we've had throughout getting broadband done. And the faster we could move, provided it's a viable project that we could vet to ensure that it makes sense, having the money sooner rather than later is advantageous to us.
That is a very creative proposal, Senator Brock. What I hear you saying is you could backstop the use of the CRF dollars with general fund dollars, so that should they be clawed back later in an audit, there would be a pot of money that could then basically stand in for it and protect the state. And I think that's a good idea. It's not my judgment call as to whether that's the best use of general fund dollars, but I like the idea for sure.
Well,
they need to get going.
Setting up the fund. We talk about setting up the broadband fund. Among its principal purposes is to be able to be used for reserve and also effectively for leveraging monies to use for other purposes. And so there will be, in effect, some of that money set aside as based on the strategy that we've agreed to adopt, I would think.
I think that's right. Where my nervousness comes in is more on the CRF side. We have, we've had definite strictures with Guidehouse and the like that have been laid down because we're very mindful that money is used subject to criteria we don't control. That's the advantage of general fund money, is that you folks control those criteria subject to what the governor chooses to do as well. So, as I said, I like the idea. I just, yeah, I, I would ask that it be very clearly documented how that these monies are going to be firmly set aside as a backstop, because they are essentially being used to ensure the use of CRF dollars. And I have felt duty bound to administer those CRF dollars strictly in compliance with the regs that we have. But I think the gist of last Friday's testimony from the CUDs was a lot of them need help, and they need it now, and that's a state policy. And so I think that's a good use of general fund dollars. And then you eliminate any inference that we're trying to do something with CRF dollars that doesn't strictly rise to meeting the needs of the pandemic.
Yeah, I think you would document the fact that it is our belief, based on the best analysis that we have, that we're using the money appropriately, but we recognize there's a risk involved. And just as we're providing a backstop of a reserve to protect the money in this, we're doing effectively the same thing. And so we are complying to the best of our knowledge with the federal law, but at the same time, we're being conservative and prudent in what we do.
As long as you make that clear as a matter of law, I'm happy. I don't think I, as commissioner, have the authority to do that.
Okay.
Senator Pearson.
Thank you. Commissioner, we've been recognizing the CUDs have a lot of technical support, grant writing support, even legal support. We've been wrestling with the idea of sort of adding some kind of central helper, I don't know, but building on, is it Mr. Fisher? Fish. He's done great work, it seems. And my attitude is we should be using, especially as we've got this opportunity to move money quickly, this time to put ourselves in the best position to really be able to use federal money if and when it comes. So one idea, and I don't think it's more than just sort of the beginning of an idea, is to put another technical support kind of grant writing help, maybe even in your office, to work with Rob. I don't know, but I wonder if you, I know you're not asking for that, but I wonder if you've thought about that or what you think about it. And you've said I think I remember you saying we're hesitant to offer legal help, but these guys could do that. I'm also curious if we offer them grant writing help, and we've done that in other areas of state government. It's been very successful. But how do we handle the fact that they could well be competing for the same, different CUDs competing for the same pile of money? So that's a lot I've thrown at you. But generally, do you have thoughts on this? And is this something you think would be smart to explore?
I definitely have thoughts on this, and let me start by saying, yes, I think you'd be very smart to explore this. We talked about this briefly last September. I think it was one of the last meetings we had together, and I recall testifying in response to Senator Cummings that I thought that we should be looking at what the next iteration of a vehicle looks like for regulating and promoting, if you will, or developing, because the two are not the same. And my shop exists first and foremost to regulate what has been what I'm going to call telecom of the past. And there's this need to have, promotion, development, intellectual capital investment in broadband and cell connectivity and the like. This is something that you recognized when you had the VTA several years ago. And then for a variety of reasons, it was put into dormancy. And so I do think the moment is at hand for the state to be preparing, because it's pretty clear to me that the federal government is going to be sending us substantial money. And so for broadband specifically. So this session, what we have so far is a bill in the House that I think you're probably familiar with. And if you're not, I'm sure you will be shortly. That's the
We will be.
Indeed, the community, I keep trying to get the acronym right, the Community Broadband Development Authority, I think it is. Anyway, Then you have the vehicle that I believe Senator Brock has proposed as of yesterday, which I think has been referred to as VTA Revival or VTA 2.0. And then you have something in between, which is what I have been talking about, which is the Broadband Infrastructure Deployment Fund, which is modeled after the Clean Energy Development Fund, which the department has here that we've been running for several years. In my judgment, any one of those three vehicles would serve the purpose of preparing the state for that sizable federal injection of funding. Um, it's what do we want to do, and there's no pride of authorship on my end, which is why I have approached this issue in the legislature as I have. I haven't come in with a proposed bill that says here's what you should do, but rather I put a thought piece out there, which I think was relayed to this committee a couple of weeks ago, and I'm happy to send it again. It's a white paper, and I've provided that to the House as well. And many of the components in my Broadband Infrastructure Deployment Fund thought piece are in the House bill, and I have not yet finished reviewing the proposed legislation that Senator Brock has prepared, but it looks to me like it essentially has a fund and it has a board of directors and a variety of responsibilities, some of which are beyond just broadband and cell service. They go to telecom planning and the like. So I think this is a good conversation for us to be having. It does need to be resolved this session, if you ask me, because that money's coming from DC and we need to be ready. Basically, I think the most important thing is to set this up for success, and separating the regulatory function from the development promotion function, I think would be a major success, which is why in my thought piece, when I proposed the Broadband Infrastructure Development Fund, Deployment Fund, I had created a board that would be decisional, it would have decisional authority, and it did not have the Commissioner of Public Service or other executive branch officials on it, because I wanted it to be truly autonomous. They have an executive director who would be an employee of the state and would be responsive to the commissioner, which is how we have the Clean Energy Development Fund set up. But I don't insist on that. I can't tell you that there's great wisdom there. Some people have felt there needs to be a closer nexus between whatever this entity is and the executive branch, because that was missing with the VTA. I don't have an opinion on that matter, frankly. I know that in administering the Clean Energy Development Fund, my approach as commissioner has been to regard that board as an autonomous entity where the board members have a fiduciary duty to their responsibilities as a board, and I, in turn, as a government executive, have a responsibility not to interfere with that autonomous functioning of that board. That would be subverting their mission, and I don't think that would be appropriate. Not only wouldn't it be appropriate, I suspect it's not legal. So I think that has worked, but I can understand that to some people that might just not look like a workable function. So I suspect if my thought piece was not in the picture, you would be going at it the way you usually do with two competing bills, and through reconciliation of some kind, you would come up with an entity that you think will serve. And I certainly am prepared to give whatever advice you choose to seek from me on that. I should tell you that the governor is very much in listening mode on this. He's, as a matter of principle, not keen on creating a lot of new government infrastructure, which is why I proposed this BIDIF fund, because that, for the most part, draws on Department of Public Service infrastructure. But what he most cares about is having a vehicle that will actually work and that will be prepared for that sizable federal funding. I hope that answers your question. Oh, there's one more thing, Senator Pearson. You'd asked specifically about Mr. Fish's position. I think for the federal funding that's coming, that we will need more than just one more person doing grant writing and the like. And you may not be aware, but the department successfully won a grant from the Northern Borders Regional Commission to fund a position that helps with financing and finding partnerships to do financing for the CUD's work. to accelerate their work. So we've been pushing in that direction already, recognizing that that one rural broadband specialist position that came to us 2 years ago at this point is not enough to meet all the demands of what our whole state is practically covered in CUDs now. And that was not the case when that position came to us. So more is needed. As for the legal question for representation, one of the elements that I found appealing in the House bill was that they were going to refer the legal work to the Attorney General's office, as opposed to having the department's lawyers do that. And I think that's an improvement. But frankly, I think the best thing on that score is to empower, the board of this new entity to retain counsel, to contract for counsel. That would be the cleanest thing to do, and I think most appropriate.
Okay, so for our purposes now, which is what do we need to get out in the next month? Probably if we set up the fund, whatever, but just a small fund that could answer immediate needs. So we seem to have some CUDs who are signing partnership contracts and they need an attorney to read it and say,
Exactly.
you need to do that. We probably could get by for a few months with that slush fund, for lack of a better word, but just a fund that could keep them going on a daily basis. And then discuss what entity is going to be responsible for the development and promotion of broadband in this state, and deal with ongoing legal support in that discussion. And also, I suppose, grant writing in that discussion. Okay.
And also, I think the powers to judge what projects to fund. So grant writing, as in getting money for the fund, and granting, if you will, for the work of the fund in relation to the CUDs and whoever else you deem to be eligible for those funds. And then, of course, the work of pairing with other entities like VITA to leverage those funds through a variety of instruments. Right. Yes. That it would seem to me you could establish a fund like that. You could probably put it in the Connectivity Initiative program. Both the House bill and Senator Brock's bill, I think, contemplate ultimately transferring the Connectivity Initiative to whatever entity is created, which is very much what my construct contemplates as well. So that might be a good place to put it. And I don't know if you need to create more criteria for the use of that money, but it might be wise to have some of that so that you can manage the CUD's expectations as to what the money will be spent on. And then to Senator Brock's point, if you're trying to use the fund as a backstop to CRF, then we have to be very clear.
Oh, yeah.
The guidance is you need to abide by the CRF criteria.
Right. That's the next stop down the road. Okay. So
what you might want to do, though, is as far as this fund and as far as the monies we're talking about right now, is you may put some CRF money in there, but you also may put some general fund money in there, because there will be some things that clearly may fall outside of the CRF requirements, but that do need to be done now in order to keep the acceleration of these various projects underway.
I think as I go through the 1.2 and I think 1.8 million that we've done for the projects we didn't get done with CRF, and the two other things out of the Universal Service Fund that needed funding. And then there wasn't much left for a fund for CUD. So I think we're going to put some general fund money in there. The question is, how much are we going to need? I suppose we can always transfer some at some point. I have a feeling this is not going to be the last fast-tracked bill, but But any thoughts, Commissioner, you know, your folks could give us on what would be an adequate fund? I'm not thinking of paying their overhead, their lights, their bookkeeper, you know, their salaries, but legal, there was legal, grant writing and engineering. Engineering seems to circle it. And then there's the whole discussion on, are we going to pole harvest with the, you know, the Google machine, and who owns it and where is it going to rest? And I've already gotten some pushback from one of my local telecoms about, they felt the House bill excluded them, that money could only go if they were in partner with a CUD. But they've been stringing broadband, I think, like Franklin Cable, like crazy. And
Cable or fiber?
so pardon?
Fiber.
Cable or fiber?
Fiber. I'm not technologically savvy.
Oh,
I know. You were a teacher. You're a stickler for grammar.
no, I want to know what they were
Driving me
stringing.
nuts.
I just want to know what they were stringing.
To my understanding, it's fiber. Senator Hardy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I feel like is anyone else having a sense of deja vu? I feel like we've had this
Yes.
conversation like 3 or 4 times.
Yes.
And I
We'll
look back
probably
at
do it
my,
a few more times.
what, Chris?
We'll probably do it a few more times.
I'm sure we will. It's really fun. Really fun.
Now, I plan
I
on
love you
writing the
all.
letter next week. So,
Well, so I looked at my notes from the last several times we had this conversation, and, you know, maybe I'm not familiar with the, you know, when this committee has made a decision, like, do we take a vote or how are we doing it? So, but I have in my notes that the 3.2 million, and that we had this long conversation of whether it was 3.2 or 3.6, but that we were going to
no,
split it.
it's 3.2.
Okay, we're going to split it between 2 uses, the LECAP fund and the subsidies. And both of those, or one of those, would also include the issue of equipment that Senator Brock.
Yeah, the
brought up.
routers and yeah.
So that would be what, if we're talking 3.2, that would be 1.6 each, right, for those 2 programs, and that the commissioner would have the ability to move it between the programs to make sure that the full amount was spent. And then after we talked about CUDs, I have in my notes that we were looking at about the equivalent amount for CUDs for pre-construction costs, sort of broadly defined, and that could include pole harvesting, high-level design, engineering. It might include some grant writing and legal fees if that was necessary as a pre-construction cost. And again, the commissioner would maybe use some of, you know, have the sources a little bit fungible based on what was eligible for CRF versus general fund, with those 3 options, with those 3 pots or purposes. And then we'd also identified the 191 hotspots that needed to be, and then I think 20 of them.
Yeah, re-licensed.
And that was around 20,000, and then 50,000 for the RCC, which is the deaf and hard of hearing thing. Yeah, the conference calling.
Yep.
And then there was the conversation about, you know, the lovely conversation that we've also had many times about the Universal Service Fund and how we deal with that. And so that also came up. And then the pole harvesting is both part of the CUD conversation and a broader statewide conversation. And so we didn't quite resolve that, but a lot of that pole harvesting would have been done within the pre-construction costs for CUDs. So that was my recollection, that we would have.
That your notes are better than mine, but
Okay.
you are spot on.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that so that
Yeah.
was what I thought we'd already decided. So
I
but
think with finding out that Senator Kitchell also wants us to look at more than the 3.2. So now we're at the fund that covers everything you had for the CUDs, or
well, so what I
perhaps
just,
some of our local Franklin Telephone, Waitsfield, Champlain Valley, that are also stringing,
Right.
that they could apply for some of these monies. And the question I think before us now is how much and what kind of a fence do we put around those dollars so that we can keep them moving forward until we resolve all those future things like governance structure and a plan
Right.
for how we're going to go about this.
Right.
So this is,
so what I listed is about $5 million if you round, CRF
Okay.
and general fund combined.
how much did you put into the
to the
slush fund?
CUDs?
Yeah.
Again, 1.6, like we did 1.6, 1.6, 1.6, and then
Okay.
a little extra for these miscellaneous things.
Little miscellaneous.
And then-
I think that sounds fine.
So an even 5 with the ability of the commissioner to, move it around as she needs for both purpose and use of funds, the CRF versus the general fund.
Okay, Senator Sirotkin.
Now that we're past the CRF funds and into one-time funds, we've also said several times that we were going to do a wraparound program for subsidies for low-income people getting their broadband service until the federal dollars come. So, and I asked the commissioner last time, she said she would try and cost that out.
Yeah, I thought we provided that to the committee I think to Senator Cummings. Clay sent you something on Monday.
Clay, I'm looking for Clay and I'm halfway down. And it
Okay.
won't let me move because I'm getting reminder we have to go.
So Senator Sirotkin, we did get that data
Yeah.
to you folks, but I apologize.
I
have
was scrolling down here.
Are those funds not included in the list that Senator Hardy just read to us?
I didn't hear Senator Hardy mention that.
But my question is, are they not in that list?
I said subsidies. I don't know if Senator Sirotkin, if you're talking about something different, but there was 1.6 for the subsidies for broadband.
Okay, I did get, we have an estimated the cost of the TBS at $123,560 per month. This is a high-end estimate. Marketing and the same take-up rate of 2,964 applicants. So that is one of, and that's the present subsidy that you're administering, right?
Correct. So
Okay.
The present subsidy would capture the population that Senator Sirotkin has been concerned about. If your decision, as Senator Hardy just said, is to simply continue the program with 1.6 in funding, that would definitely capture the concerns Senator Sirotkin has. It would allow us to reach more than just folks who qualify under common federal definitions for low-income subsidies and the like. And if you afford me the discretion that you've described to move money around, that has the added benefit of ensuring that if the money doesn't move in the ways that you're intending right now, it can still get spent for purposes that you've approved of before the deadline. One of the surprises last year was that the take rate on the subsidies wasn't higher than it was. I ascribe that mainly to the fact that the program ramped up later than we would have liked, and folks just did not understand that that help was available to them. But we can get that word out. We can build on the momentum we've already created. But still, there's a possibility that you can appropriate $1.6 million for that, and we can only, at the end of the day, spend, say, $1 million on it. It would be good at a point in time, say August or September, to say, okay, this money just isn't moving the way we thought it would, but we know the CUDs could really use it for fill in the blank activity that fits within the parameters of the CRF. And so then I do that reallocation. So
I apologize, Madam Chair. I thought the 1.6 was for line connection subsidies.
There is one point, we got 1.6 for everything.
Yeah,
Okay.
One for
There were
subsidies,
three
one for the line
1.6.
connections.
I got you covered, Michael. I've been
Yeah,
trying to listen to
and one for
everybody and put it on
slush.
my list.
So the
Frank,
answer is
Okay.
yes, it's in Miss Senator Hardy's calculations.
And
Yes.
we could include the position that Senator Pearson mentioned. It's still within the, if we gave Rob a helper, like a short-term position, a 1-year temporary position.
Limited service. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that is going to help us push more money out quickly, right? That's to me the principle that should drive this.
Yeah, we can do that with within the 5 million, because the extra is for the other little things like the hotspots and everything. So if we are rounding to 5 million, we can all have our cake. And
Well,
then
I think if we just put in the request, approps will decide if they're going to take it out of the money or they're going to, I think it's our recommendation that we fund an assistant for the CUD technical. You can send me his official title, that we either do a second position or an assistant to that position, but more people to help with the need for the CUDs. And yeah, that could even come out of the CUD fund. We'll leave it to approps to figure out how to divvy it up. I'll just say we're trying to stay close to 5 million. But these are the priorities that we see.
Madam Chair, if I may just be so bold, you mentioned earlier that you did not want to spend the money, and by that I understood general fund money, on keeping the lights on for the CUDs, paying their overhead, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I just wanted to circle back to that because I think given that these enterprises are staffed by citizen volunteers, this may be an instance where some of that overhead money would be well spent, because these folks, they need some staffing or, support.
Okay.
And it's really about keeping them, keeping the momentum going. They're not on life support exactly, but for some of them, it's kind of like that.
It's close.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
I heard several of them were working with regional planning and that they were getting the office space, and some of the others seemed to be working off their kitchen table. So just some assistance to say, geez, if you go 2 blocks down the road and find regional planning, they can probably help you, and perhaps we can come up with some money to help them.
I think that would be appropriate because
okay.
the regional planning commissions are straining as well. They've been helping us on a variety of
I
things.
know.
And we're about to make more demands because we're launching on the comprehensive energy plan exercise now. And that is very time intensive for the regional planning.
Okay.
commissions. I've always felt there was a good role, a good nexus between the CUDs and the RPCs, but the infrastructure and the funding isn't there yet. And that's something to be.
Okay, so we'll work on that. Senator Brock, I'm going to try and give you 2 minutes before we
Right.
have to join.
Then I'll be very. I believe it's important to put more money out up front in order to get this moving, because if we don't do that, all the rest of this will fall apart.
Mhm.
They need that right now. What we can do is break them from the expectation that funding is continuous funding But at some point it will gradually drain away, and they will be responsible once they have revenues of making that up.
And to
Okay.
your point, Senator Brock, in my discussions with the federal delegation, in talking about the money, I've been positing, you could give us a chunk of money for us to put out to get universal connectivity done. You could give us a chunk of money to really capitalize our CUD model. And if the CUDs aren't alive, if that money comes for that purpose, then we've lost some ground there. So
Okay.
keeping the momentum going would be good.
All right. Senator Hardy, I just found out we've got 15 more minutes, so I was looking at 3.
When we are on our little break, I'll send you all an email with my accounting of what I've heard from everybody. And then when we come back, you can tell me if I got it right. And then you can use it for your letter to Senator Kitchell. Ann.
That sounds great. We'll get that one out and in the mail.
And I'll
Okay.
copy you, Commissioner, so you see it too.
Oh, thank you. I really, really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I wonder too if you might spend a little time thinking about the broadband core concept that the Matt Dunn crew with their emergency plan floated last year. If you recall, we spent some money on the emergency broadband plan, and among many suggestions they made was that you mobilize a core of people to go out and help people understand the technology they have, help them understand connectivity that in fact is available to them that they're just not aware of, show them how to use devices. In other words, address technology
SWAT
literacy.
team.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a conservation corps concept. And I really think, especially with the better weather coming, there might be a place for that. And in a pandemic, it's a good idea because people just have so many misunderstandings about what the nature of their connectivity is, and they think their problem is they don't have enough bandwidth, or they think the problem is they don't have enough speed, when in fact the problem is they're not locating their equipment in a good place, or they don't have compatible gear or the like. So just having folks go out there and say helping the elderly deal with technophobia so they can get telehealth, I think would be a wise thing to do. So you might think about that.
We might solve some of our audio only difficulty.
I know. I was thinking the same thing. We were just having this conversation this morning. And there was a program that did that kind of, the iPad thing we heard about this morning.
There you go.
Yeah, they did work with
of college students. This is
Yeah.
my army of
There's
college
the
students.
army. There you
Yeah.
go.
They
Well,
can
Yeah.
measure polls and they can help with iPads and routers at the same time.
Right. And for what it's
Okay,
worth,
so
I'm
we'll find out.
Yeah, I'm coming
That's
to you
an
today from
interesting
my office.
concept.
I'm in Montpelier today because I actually have EC fiber at home, 100 up, 100 down fiber, and there's something wrong with it today. So here I am.
Well, I found out my computer didn't have enough internal memory to handle Zoom.
There you
I
go.
just bought a cheap computer to type letters because that's what I do. So, okay, committee, we've got about 15 minutes. If there isn't anything else, take a look. This SWAT team concept, I'm not sure how we'd price that out.
I
but
think broadband plan speaks to that.
Okay, I will
I'll
find
look
that
at
one
it and send you
and
that.
take a look at it.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll see everybody. Faith did send out a set of numbers for the next thing, and then when we finish with Congressman Welch, we're going to come back to us because we have one more agenda item before we go home.